Los Angeles, 1981. The Sunset Strip is buzzing. Neon lights, rock stars, and cocaine moving as fast as the music. But just a few blocks away, inside a small house on Wonderland Avenue, something far darker is unfolding. By morning, 4 people would be found brutally murdered, bludgeoned in a scene so violent, even seasoned detectives were shaken. No forced entry, no clear motive, just whispers of drugs, money, and one name that kept surfacing: John Holmes.
Welcome to Unlawful Acts, the podcast where we dive into the darkest stories of true crime, unearthing some of the most shocking and incredible stories about the world's most infamous criminals. I'm Susan Davis.
And I'm your co-host, Jocelyn Frankhuizen. And let me just say, I am so excited to be here with you, Susan. This is a dream come true for me. And thank you to our audience, and thank you to you for having me on as your new co-host.
And we're really excited to have her. It's been a lot of fun. We've been really investigating the Wonderland Murders as of late. And so we're going to unpack all those details for you today. And so, well, let's get to it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll jump into the story with what I think is a great point of setting the scene. So we need to know who the players of the game are first, right? First and foremost is John Holmes, who was arguably the most notorious adult film star of the 1970s and 80s. Right. This guy was larger than life. This is the person that Boogie Nights was. Yes. So Boogie Nights was made after him and his life story. He was incredibly well known in the industry and also just in Hollywood in general. And he really is the glue behind what happened on Wonderland Avenue because of his ties, like you said, to the most notorious kingpin in Hollywood, Eddie Nash, and this crew of not necessarily petty criminals, but criminals nonetheless that lived on Wonderland Avenue in the Hollywood Hills.
Well, and weren't they drug addicts as well?
So this is a group of people that would pretty much do whatever it takes to get their drugs and get their drug money. You know, they were stealing from other drug dealers. They were doing petty crimes. John Holmes was actually going to LAX and stealing baggage off of the baggage carousel.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. But like I said, a group of friends that all would party together and essentially were, you know, operating as a gang. So John Holmes is in the middle because, like I said, he's this, you know, larger than life porn guy. And back in those days, it was, you know, a very rare form of celebrity that these nightclub people thought was pretty interesting. Eddie Nash was the kingpin who was, you know, the main guy in all of Hollywood. He was the one that was running the drugs. He was allegedly running the prostitution rings as well. I would guess that there was some arms dealing going in there. He owned, I think, something like 7 nightclubs at the height of his day.
Yeah, and he was known to be he was a guy you didn't mess with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he was known to be somebody that could, let's say, make a problem go away.
Right.
He had high security around him. He had you know, the muscle that would keep him safe. Right. And he lived in this pretty impressive property over in Studio City that he, you know, considered his fortress. So that was actually the place that the initial incident that led to the murders took place.
Well, did he have parties there? Did they all hang out there? Was it sort of that kind of place? Or was it like armed guards or was it both?
Well, not necessarily armed guards, but there was always muscle around him because he was known to have like millions of dollars in assets, jewelry, you know, guns, pounds of cocaine on him and in the property pretty much at all times. So I wouldn't say that there were armed guards per se, but there were definitely muscle around him to make sure that nothing would go down and that he remained safe. And, he would have people coming and going, buying drugs, coming to party and use drugs, at all hours, any kind of day of the week. It was a very common occurrence at the house.
Gotcha.
Bringing it back to Eddie Nash, this is somebody that's very well connected to John Holmes and somebody that was known to, be an aggressor if he needed to, and definitely was not somebody that you wanted to mess with. So
and he was really good friends with Holmes at the time. Well,
he was
as close as you can be to a guy like that.
In that kind of circle, exactly. Right. So he was very good friends with John Holmes. I think he was kind of enamored with the level of his celebrity and would kind of keep him around because people in the nightlife industry, I mean, they did then and they still do. They like to have, ritzy, famous celebrity types around them. It makes them look cool. It makes them look, relevant. So John Holmes was one of those people to Eddie Nash, and they actually both considered themselves friends. So where it gets interesting is the fact that John Holmes, although he was, this very well-known talent, somebody that was paid a lot of money for his craft during the height of his career, it had completely, gone into the gutter at the point of these murders. He was severely addicted to cocaine. He was freebasing. He was just not in a good way. He owed money to, I believe he owed money to Eddie Nash. He also owed money to a few different circles of individuals and other drug dealers. And one day, his Wonderland crew puts him up to, this scheme where they're saying, hey, bud, we're going to give you $400. We're going to have you go to Eddie Nash's house and actually buy drugs. And while you're there, we want you to case the house so that we can rob the property of whatever is there that's valuable, including the drugs, and then get away.
Bad plan.
Bad plan, yeah. Bad plan.
Real bad plan.
So they gave him the $400, and Holmes was actually at the house 3 separate times on the day of the murder, which is really what raised the red flags for him. Why would you be at somebody's house that many times in one day if you weren't up to something or if you weren't trying to learn something? So on his last visit, he's there, he's partying, he stays until whenever in the night, and he actually allegedly leaves the back door of the house open, which is what allowed his Wonderland friends to enter the property and then rob Nash. So, yes. So that's essentially how he's the glue for this whole, horrific scene that is about to unfold. And at that point in time, the Wonderland gang enters the property and they restrain Nash to a chair and they beat him. They beat him to a pulp. And and this is a man that typically has a lot of security around him. For whatever reason, he didn't. And he's begging for his life, and they actually steal, I believe it was a couple of pounds of cocaine, $150,000 in cash, a bunch of jewelry. There are some reports that say that the theft was up to $1 million in valuation. So they really made out with this.
And they thought they were going to get away with it.
Absolutely. They thought that they were going to get away with it. They were probably high as a kite when this all went down as well. Yeah. So they flee the scene, they get away. And, at that point in time, that's when things actually get kind of interesting. So, the famous piano player Liberace.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So his boyfriend at the time, his name is Scott Thorson. Scott Thorson was a known associate and friend of Eddie Nash as well, because Liberace and Eddie Nash were in business together in the nightclub industry.
Well, and wasn't Scott sort of quasi-famous himself because he was romantically involved with Liberace and traveled with him and all that?
Exactly. He was the non-boyfriend boyfriend, right? Right. So yes, he was very well known, and he actually used to go visit Eddie Nash's house once a month to pick up cash because of the business that Liberace and Nash had together. It was his monthly profit. So on the day that he is going to pick up this cash, apparently this is a day where one of the muscle men of Eddie Nash was present after he had grabbed Holmes. because they had
Right.
put two and two together, thinking that Holmes, had something to do with the robbery. And Scott Thorson says that he witnessed John Holmes confess and say that it was the Wonderland gang that had initiated the robbery.
So how'd they get him to confess?
Oh, they beat the hell out of him. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that's what
good
they
old
do.
fashioned beatdown really did it for him. So now we're at the point where Holmes has confessed that the Wonderland crew are the ones that have, initiated this robbery.
Nash knows.
Nash knows,
Yeah.
this is where things get really hot. Allegedly, there was a point in time where during the days between the robbery, John Holmes is seen walking around with a piece of jewelry that he had, that was stolen from Eddie Nash's house. Like, it's just starting to get really ridiculous.
Yeah.
So how the story goes is that Gregory Dials, who was the main muscle of Eddie Nash, goes to the property on Wonderland Drive in the middle of the night. Apparently, he arrives at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's unknown if he's alone or if he was with John Holmes. There are reports that say that there were 3 killers. There are reports that say that, Dials acted alone. All of that is really unclear because, again, this is something that was never formally solved. Like, there was nobody that was ever formally charged with the murders in this case.
Right.
So there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of hearsay around it, and there's a lot of conflicting reports because the people that are involved in this story are all really dirty, and they all had something massive to lose. So everybody's kind of blurring the lines between what happened and what didn't. So the night of the murders are a point in Los Angeles history that I think really changed things for
Sure.
a lot of people that live in the area. This is up until this point. Yeah, sure. People were partying in the hills. Yeah, sure. Laurel Canyon was an artist enclave that was kind of funky and bohemian and known for that sex, drugs, and rock and roll element. But to my knowledge, up until this point, nothing, truly, truly heinous in what was present day had happened up there. Of course, there were
Right.
like, way back when there's the Black Dahlia murders and things like that were, more like 20s and 30s lore. But we're talking the 1980s. This is, arguably not that long ago. And this is a crime that really has left an impact on the neighborhood still.
Right.
So I'll take you through the crime scene.
Okay.
And then we can kind of put the pieces together as
as we move along. Yeah.
So upon entering the house, you make your way up a set of stairs and you enter the main door, and there's a living room area. So in the living room is where our first victim was found. Her name was Barbara Richardson. She was the girlfriend of David Clay Lind, who was a tenant of the Wonderland house and a member of the Wonderland gang, and she was just simply in town visiting. It's not known that she had anything to do with the robbery or that she was, a criminal in her own right. She was simply just there visiting her boyfriend for a weekend. She was found next to the couch that she had been sleeping on, and the scene is truly horrific. I mean, she is found with severe blunt force trauma wounds to her skull. Her face is, partially gone at that point. It was said that they actually they brutally antagonized these individuals with either a metal pipe or a claw hammer or both. And she was found in a massive pool of her own blood. There's blood spatter all against the wall, against the living room area, on the ceiling. One of the investigators described it as the most horrific murder scene that he has ever seen to date.
Oh, wow.
So that was
that's
victim
right.
number 1. It was truly frightening. Victim number 2 is Joy Miller, who was found in her bed. And next to her on the bed was one of the murder weapons, which was a claw hammer. So Joy Miller is found again in a pool of her own blood. This again is blunt force trauma to the skull, which left her with severe skull fractures and, ultimately was the cause of her death. Where it gets really interesting is Joy Miller's bed was also the point where a handprint belonging to John Holmes was found.
Right.
Yes. So it's unclear if he was there. Of course, he had been to the house a million times. Who knows why that handprint was there? But there were some investigators that speculated that he actually placed his hand on the top of the headboard while he struck her. And that's how that pattern would make sense.
But he had been there so many times, it could have been a height of passion or something like that.
Yeah, he could have been in bed for another reason. We have no idea,
Yeah.
But of course, it's pretty convenient that happened as it did. And again, a truly horrible scene. So in the second bedroom are where the third victim was found. So the third victim, his name is Ron Launius. He was found in his bed with his wife, Susan Launius, who was the only surviving victim, only survivor of this crime. And Ron, again, was beaten to death. He was victim to blunt force trauma, either hit again with a metal pipe or a claw hammer. Unclear, which of the weapons was used, but a truly gruesome scene again.
Yeah, and as we looked at some of these notes, we discovered that they were really they had done so many drugs, and it's typical to kind of pass out and not have any recovery to that. And so it would have made it easier for them to move through the house without somebody waking up and saying, what's going on?
Yes. And again, these are people that are using all different types of drugs, not just uppers like freebase or cocaine. There's also trace amounts of heroin, which obviously if you intake enough heroin, you're not going to awaken very easily, even if there is a heinous crime happening inside your home. There was one more victim that was found inside the house. This is Billy Deverell, who was second in command of the Wonderland gang. And he was actually found at the foot of his bed, sitting upright, leaning against the TV stand. So it's unclear if he had some sort of struggle and then fell backwards. But each and every one of these people, including Susan Launius, who was alive after these attacks, was struck with a claw hammer and or a metal pipe so many times in the head that it caused their death.
Right.
And Susan Launius, I mean, when we say that she's lucky to be alive, I mean, it's truly incredible that she is. She was, a result of her injuries was such severe brain trauma that she actually has no recollection of the days before or after the incident. She had to have part of her skull surgically removed as a result to her injuries. And she also lost part of her finger. So you can imagine either she was fighting back and then passed out, and maybe they thought that, they had killed her and that's why they left her to die. Or she was just, maybe, let's say, trying to protect her face and was struck when this happened. And that is how her hand was impacted as well. Yeah, I mean, it's gnarly. There are 26 minutes of video footage that was taken by an investigator on the scene. And if you search as hard as I did, you can find it on the internet. And let's just say, don't watch that before dinner or before bed. It is really, really horrible to see. Truly to think that anybody is capable of doing this to other human beings, I mean, it was...
Well, and it makes sense that they, that they sort of said, geez, these guys had something to do with it because it was so horrific.
Of course. I mean, this is something that was extremely methodical. The person who executed these crimes or executed these murders deliberately moved through each and every room of this house and did so in a sense that, there weren't extreme signs of struggle. Like you would think, high or not, you would think that if something is happening in room 1, that there would be cries for help or desperate cries for your life. And the persons in room 2 and 3 would hear this and come running. But that's not what happened at all. So whoever was responsible for these executions, was capable of doing so with such force that I would guess it happened rather quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
It would have to.
Definitely.
And it's interesting that they could get in and out without, anyone in the neighborhood sort of reacting.
Well, that's where it gets crazy, is allegedly, this is all going down at 4:00 in the morning. Apparently, there was a neighbor that heard some sort of commotion or screaming or maybe cries for help or whatever. But again, this is a notorious party house. This is a house where there's a lot of, kind of like transient, not so great people coming and going on the regular. So apparently the neighbor that overheard what was going on, she actually just turned up her TV. And
isn't that insane?
It's insane. It's insane.
Oh, geez, 4 a.m. and people are screaming, but you know what? I'm just going to turn my TV up.
Let's just forget about it. This is the Hollywood Hills. I don't want to be bothered by that. There's probably some crazy stuff going on next door that I don't want anything to do with. I'm just going to turn up my TV and carry on with my day.
Right.
And that's exactly what she did. So not until 4:00 in the afternoon the next day, so 12 hours later, were the police called, because apparently some movers actually heard Susan Lanius crying out for help.
Yeah.
Maybe she was crying out for help, or she was, in such intense pain, she was just crying in distress. But it wasn't until 4:00 the next day that actually authorities were called.
Well, and it's amazing that she survived. When you think
incredible.
about it, 12 hours had gone by.
No,
and then they're just being called. It's amazing she survived.
It's incredible that she survived, exactly, considering the time that elapsed between the injuries and when they were called, because she was literally bleeding out in her own bed next to her husband for 12 hours. It's disgusting. So the police were called, and now we're left with a now what moment. It's very easy to finger point in one of these situations. But in fact, it actually took many months until John Holmes was arrested for these crimes. He wasn't arrested until March of 1982.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of forensics left behind.
No.
As you mentioned, and as we found, there was only that one palm print.
Yes.
And so they made the connection just between the associations and whatever.
Yes.
John Holmes is arrested, and he's charged with the 4 murders. The deeper that the investigators dug, though, the darker it got. And they kind of decided that it was a brutal kind of retaliation for breaking into Eddie Nash's home. And so the one question that they couldn't escape was, Holmes just the broken down, drug deprived kind of go-between, or was he the guy who helped with the murder? They really kind of were loosely putting that together. And so the Wonderland Murders really unfolded over 3 separate trials.
Yes.
So first came the trial of John Holmes, and this was over a span of 10 years. So John Holmes' trial took about 3 or 4 weeks. So the prosecutors have kind of put together that whole scenario that he was the guy who put all the pieces together and was the glue between everything, and that he had set everything up, that he was present when the murders took place, and that he had actually been the one, because of the palm print, that had committed these murders in retaliation for the theft at Eddie Nash's home. The defense, of course, argued the opposite. This is just a guy who was living a very different life than he had led before. He was broke and drug addicted and was just really a frightened guy caught in the middle.
And also not enough to really place him with any type of guilt.
Well, and there were some witnesses that claimed that he was actually at a hotel with a woman named Dawn Schiller at the time.
Yes.
But between all of what the prosecutors were trying to make all these pieces of the puzzle work, they just, the jury was not convinced, and they acquitted him after a 3-week, like I said, a 3-week trial. So then they decided they were going to go after Eddie Nash and Gregory Diles. So again, they bring him in and they try him. I think the trial took like 3 weeks again. Same argument that they presented, different jury, same argument. But you got to remember, a lot of this has already been on the on the news. They had acquitted John Holmes on the same exact kind of scenario. So they, and again, the defense said, hey, they didn't do anything to these people. You haven't placed any of them at the scene. There's no forensics that you can point to. There was nothing under anybody's fingernails. Anything that you could point to say that those two people or even Gregory Diles was even there.
Which is so crazy to me because, of course, it's all speculative at that point. But the speculation against Nash is pretty damning. I mean, he had motive. He had this huge, piece of muscle that was known to carry out any type of retaliation on his behalf. And the fact that there wasn't anything to, physically place Diles there kind of blows my mind.
Well, yeah. And so the funny thing is in this trial, the prosecutors were largely successful.
Yes.
Except there was one juror who was a holdout and he voted not guilty, which created a hung jury.
Yes.
So then the prosecutors decide they're going to try the two again.
But isn't that juror later on, wasn't it discovered that juror was bribed?
Well, yeah. I mean, that came up later in another trial that Eddie Nash was in. And so in this, so here they are, they're going back after a hung jury. They're trying Eddie Nash and Gregory Diles again. Same arguments are presented. The whole thing goes again. But this time they were completely acquitted. So even though they had gotten close to convincing a jury in the prior trial, the problem that they had was, again, they didn't have any forensics. A lot of time had gone by because now we're talking about a span of 10 years.
Yes.
So a lot of time's gone by and the witnesses, aren't necessarily considered credible because, gee, I think it was this or what have you. And so
it makes perfect sense.
Memory is fuzzy.
Of course.
And so they ended up being completely acquitted and, if you will, exonerated of the crimes. So, and as you mentioned, years later, they actually went after Nash again.
Yes.
But this time it was on charges of federal racketeering.
Yeah, it's completely unrelated.
Well, it's a different court.
Yes.
Because now you're in a federal court. It's a whole different ballgame. And so when they were able to do that, it was now we're fast forwarding to 2001. And so in this federal racketeering case, they did end up convicting Nash of that crime.
Yes.
And he actually admitted that he had bribed a juror in their first trial.
50 grand.
50 grand.
50 freaking grand he gave
But then
that
he
guy.
also admitted that he had sent people over to recover his property.
Yes.
At the Wonderland mansion.
Not kill him.
No.
But to recover the property.
Oh, no, they didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
They just went to recover property.
Maybe shake him up a little bit, but definitely not with the intention to bludgeon them to death.
Well, and you would think that this says, oh, we're going to open this case right back up.
Isn't that crazy?
Because of double jeopardy, they can't go back after him again.
Yes.
So the Wonderland murders are still officially considered unresolved. They had all these different trials, and even with these later admissions, they still had not been able to win a case and resolve the Wonderland murders in the way that, in a legal way. So it was quite a long period of time, and it was quite amazing that he actually said, oh, yeah, I bribed the guy, and
I mean, this is
by the way, I went and got my stuff.
Yeah,
so,
this is like 10, then 20 years after the fact is when he was convicted on the racketeering charges.
Exactly.
Which is just insane that he was able to literally get away with murder up until that point, and technically still today.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of this case as we were looking into it. Here you've got the Wonderland gang, and they're running around robbing drug dealers and petty crimes and what have you. And you think, well, how would we know that it was Nash who finally got to him and not another drug dealer that they had?
Totally.
Because they had a reputation for doing this kind of stuff.
From what I understand, also the LAPD, didn't really pursue reopening the case or in any avenue, even if there was a legal way for them to do it, because like the writing was on the wall. They had
Right.
pretty much considered it a closed case because, in their heart of hearts, they knew who did these crimes.
Yeah,
But,
they believed it was Nash.
Totally. And thought that it was more important to utilize their resources elsewhere to,
Right.
help other people and solve other
Right.
crimes that had happened as well.
Exactly. So the thing that strikes me, though, is the neighbor who just turned her TV up.
Oh, that's nuts.
Were there other neighbors who heard anything? I don't remember. Looking at my notes, I don't recall that.
No, that was really the primary incident, was that this woman literally stated that she heard a commotion and just decided that it was a better idea to turn her TV up at 4 o'clock in the morning rather than peek her nose outside.
Or even just call the police and say,
Yeah, or
hey,
say, hey, there's something weird going on.
Yeah, there's all this ruckus going on.
Nothing.
Exactly.
Absolutely nothing.
Exactly. So, but you mentioned that he had been going around stealing luggage at the
Yes.
airports.
Yes.
But he was living in his car at the time, correct?
Yeah. So John Holmes was not in a good way, during the time of all of these crimes and these
Right.
murders.
That's
He
what I thought.
had gone from making, $200, $300, $400 a day on a shoot, regularly kind of rolling in cash, to, like you said, literally living out of his car with, a mistress or a girlfriend. He's estranged from his wife, and he was in a really desperate point of his life where he was really willing to do anything to get money or drugs. And
Well,
I think,
for a while, he was like the guy.
absolutely.
People bought him drinks. They took him out. They partied all night.
Absolutely.
He was the guy that everybody wanted to hang out with.
Yeah.
And so,
there's a lot of questions about why somebody that, was on the level of celebrity as John Holmes would hang out with people like the Wonderland gang.
right.
And I mean, it's pretty simple. Like, he didn't have to shell out any cash in order to use drugs if he was hanging out with them. It was like a freebie, right? So he literally followed his nose and would just go run around in the circles that would give him what he was after, which was the drugs.
Well, and the lack of security at the house, I thought was
Totally.
curious, because you would think that being drug dealers and having drugs in the house and having robbed several other people, you would think that they would have some kind of security. But as you mentioned, they just had
There was a phone.
Yeah.
You walked up the stairs to the house and you literally called the phone and you would get buzzed in. And apparently there used to be a set of sleeping pit bulls that would hang out on the porch. But, were there dogs? Were there not? And there surely weren't any at the time of the murders. So
Did the police find the dogs afterwards? I don't remember
I don't
seeing
think
anything
so.
about the dogs
I don't
at
think
that
so.
point. Yeah.
No.
So, gosh, but there was some reports that John Holmes had been arrested several times
Mm-hmm.
for other petty crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they thought that he might be an informant for
Yes.
the police.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation around that, actually. And there was actually another theory that said that he was acting as an informant for the LAPD. And that is one of the reasons why he was, not convicted, was that, there was some sort of favoritism, or maybe somebody called in a favor to kind of help him out and make sure that he actually didn't go down when he was on trial.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
That he was obviously giving them information, which it didn't ultimately help them much.
No.
Maybe it allowed them to finally get him on racketeering charges. I don't know. So, but for the murder trials themselves, it didn't seem to help them much in that regard.
Not at all. And do you know something that I want to mention? That I actually watched this pretty incredible docuseries on the murders that was released last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a segment about it where the two lead prosecutors actually stated on the record that they were bribed by Nash in the courtroom when he's 20 feet away from his attorneys. Apparently Nash just kind of flags them down and goes, hey guys, what's it going to take for this to go away? Like, will you guys take $250K each? $250K a piece cash. Let's just make this go away. This dude thinks that he's larger than life.
Sure.
Like, what I think it's important for people to understand is that at this point in time, like, there's no internet. You know, like when you're famous, you're famous. It's based off of recognition. It's based off of reputation, notoriety, connections, all these things. And like Eddie Nash was the kingpin of Hollywood nightlife.
Right.
So for him to say something like that in a courtroom, like he truly believed that he was going to get away with this. Like he didn't have any sense of, repercussion or any sense of consequence whatsoever. Like this guy's sitting on his, mountain of cocaine, like, hey man, what's it going to take to make this go away? Like all casual, thinking that really nothing is going to go down.
Well, and he knew that if you sort of taint the prosecutors with that sort of question, did they accept a bribe? Did they not accept a bribe? What's really going on here? He knew that could potentially help him long term.
Totally.
In terms of an appeal if he were to get convicted. And so actually, I can see why he would do that. And you're right. I mean, geez, standing in a courtroom in front of everybody doing that.
He was many things, but stupid is not one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Very calculating.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing to me that these people thought they could rob him. Especially, I mean, he had over $1 million in cocaine in his house at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it was something like several pounds of cocaine were found in his house.
Yes.
And they didn't arrest him for that I know of.
No.
Yeah.
No. And that was a regular occurrence. I mean, he always had a ton of loot in the house. It was like a known thing. Mm-hmm. But it's so crazy to me, the fact that, this is quite literally the worst possible target to go after for a crime like this. Like you're going up against a kingpin. You're going up against somebody that's a mastermind. Right. You're going up against somebody that's built an empire off of, these illicit behaviors, somebody that has so many different layers to the equation, somebody that has protection, somebody that has assets and the know-how. Like that's the guy that you're going to choose? Really?
Right. Right.
Like,
well, I mean, drug addicts don't always make the right choices.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, gosh. But in the end, the Wonderland murders weren't just another murder. They really kind of were the inevitable result of the sex, drugs, and easy money that was going on at the time.
Totally.
And there were men who believed that violence was just another business tool. And so there was a lot of that going on at that time. Like you mentioned, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have a lot of forensics, really, unless it was something that was clearly obvious, like a fingerprint. They didn't have a lot of DNA at the time. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a lot that they could tie back to any of the crime scene or any of that. And so this is the legacy of Wonderland. It's the murders that remain sort of, they remain unsolved technically.
And it still is the legacy of the neighborhood.
Yeah. The house on Wonderland Avenue sort of became the monument to what really was going on at the time to the people who lived in it. So.
Well, again, thank you for coming to what was my first episode on Unlawful Acts, and I am so looking forward to the next one and many more with you and our audience. And that being said, if you like what we had to say today and you love this story, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe below, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time.
Until next time, stay safe, my friends, and join Jocelyn and I as we investigate another unlawful act.